to both of you gentlemen, but I'm going to be as straightforward as I can. And I don't want to be cut off while I'm saying it, too. Do you believe in heterosexuals, we get married because our marriage is sealed by God. We follow the letter of the law. Now, we're not perfect, but we do. Now, you're saying we follow the God of who? Not just any God, not just any pagan God. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The same ones that the Muslims, they claim it's the same, and the Jews. And that's why same-sex marriage is an issue.
Well, I will just point out to you, let me just follow up with that you have every right to do that. But we do not live in a theocratic state. There is a separation between church and state. For example, it is against, clearly, absolutely clearly, the rules of Abraham and indeed of Christianity that you can divorce. It is forbidden. But as citizens in a civil society, you have a right to a civil divorce. This is a society based upon a separation of church and state. You are absolutely, and I would defend your right to exclude homosexuals from marriage in your congregations or whenever you see fit, although I would disagree with you. But as a matter of civil rights and of the state and of a secular society apart from the church, you're wrong. It's a civil right and it needs to be defended.
Well, then let me defend my case then.
Okay, you go ahead.
Well, there really isn't a separation between the church and the state. There is technically, but not really. And I have another question for you. What if a man says that he was very attracted to a beast, and he decided that he was born by nature to be with that beast, be it a dog or be it a whatever, and he decides he wants to marry it? I mean, how far in society are we going to go?
Thanks.
I'm sorry, but I find the equation of a human being to a beast, of homosexuals to animals, to be something that I actually beneath answering.
It seemed to me when you said that the separation of church and state was technical only, rather than actual, that you had to be describing the Constitution as a technicality in that instance, which I hope would be for most listeners, or most viewers rather, a sufficient rebuttal. The Constitution states very explicitly that the government cannot concern itself with the business of religion.
This
doesn't mean the religious people can't concern themselves with the business of government. No one intends it to mean that. Andrew and I have probably our biggest disagreement on this very point. He regards himself as in some way created and supervised by a supreme being. I can't think how anyone believes such a thing. I also think it's a very horrible idea, the idea of cradle to grave invigilation. Not only, it doesn't stop with the grave, according to people like Andrew. I think it's a really frightening and nauseating wish to be a slave. Fortunately, there's absolutely no reason to believe that there's any evidence for it at all.
This email from a woman named Ava Herring. Yes, if you are a white male, a rich white male in power, or with the perception of power, you can revel in the greatness of this country. I am a relatively poor black woman who is insulted by this display of our pompous president. Every time America makes these types of statements and gestures, there is a response from terrorists. After the U.S. arrogantly walked out of the conference in South Africa, 9/11 happened. Bush makes threats in his State of the Union address. There is more. The videotape is released. These things may be a coincidence, of course, but it contrasts sharply with what is the rest of the worldview of the U.S. Thank you. As we go to Cleveland, Ohio. Next, Cleveland, you're on the air.
Good morning, gentlemen, all three. First of all, I'm a great admirer of both of your works, Mr. Hitchens. Actually, I should say all three of you, Mr. Hitchens, Mr. Sullivan, and Mr. Lamb. I really appreciate your not pulling any punches, Mr. Hitchens and Mr. Sullivan, speaking your minds, and you, Mr. Lamb, for not speaking your mind.
We're all behaving.
There we are.
Content's under pressure.
First of all, for the sake of full disclosure, I should say I know Mr. Hitchens. I've been to his home and brought him here to speak to Cleveland about 10, 15 years ago. My name is Ayad. I called on the Democrat line, although I'm barely a Democrat. I mean, the Democrat Party has just gotten so sleazy. I've been a Democrat since I came to this country from Iraq 30 years ago, but it's just it's lost me. There's nothing left that it stands for worth.
That, by the way, Christopher and I disagree on on the most important things about, whether God exists and whether he loves us, but we agree completely on the unimportant things, like Clinton was one of the worst presidents in American history, and we do so from very different angles, but our disgust at his presidency is one of the things that we can both, I think, thoroughly agree with each other about.
Indeed.
Go ahead, caller.
Sorry?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I've got two issues. This Democrat Party issue was sort of a small one. I always rank Clinton down there as down with Harding, as far as this century goes, as one of the sleaziest. And,
You're flattering him.
Sorry?
You're flattering him.
Maybe. Well, certainly with his marriage, I would be. I mean, Mrs. Harding was outstanding. My other question, though, is about Colin Powell. Do you think there is a chance? I mean, I want to start a groundswell, a campaign to hound him out of office. Do you think that stands any chance, considering everything he's been wrong on, from back in 1990 after the invasion of Kuwait and his call to give sanctions and try, and then his fears that tens of thousands of Americans would die in that war, and his pulling up short during the eviction of the Iraqi forces from Kuwait, and then of course later with Bosnia and he being chastised by Madeleine Albright. Not to mention that he was chastised by Dick Cheney during the Kuwait crisis, and then again here with Afghanistan and the Taliban, and again on Iraq now. Could we tell this man that he should step aside if he had any dignity and self-respect, that he's been wrong, and to admit his mistakes, and not to be so concerned with his career and his justifying his past mistakes?
Thanks, caller.
I think that one has to make a distinction here. Colin Powell was asked to serve his president by the President of the United States. He didn't push himself forward in this respect. I couldn't agree with you more about Colin Powell's past errors of judgment. However, I do think that the notion that he and Bush are somehow not on the same page is wrong. Bush is a smart man. He realizes that it's important and useful to have at the table someone with Colin Powell's instincts. You want someone there to say, hold on a minute, wait, what do our allies feel? What is the diplomatic dimension to this particular war? And I think that Bush is smart enough to use him and to have him at the table. I also think that it is a very important thing for the United States to have a man who is not only of enormous stature abroad, but is an African-American and who can show the world, as Condi Rice shows the world, that this administration is also diverse.
Let me get a statement in here. Just to break, this has nothing to do with either one of you, and it has just asked Michelle Malkin on Friday morning, January the 18th. She stated that MicroStrategy Incorporated went bankrupt. That statement is erroneous. In fact, MicroStrategy is not and has never been in bankruptcy. Now, Mr. Hitchens.
I wonder what the backstory of that announcement is.
Oh, wouldn't that be fun? Huh? Yes. Well, the fact of the matter is she stated it, and it's not true. So
fair enough. Well, this is a very high standard show.
We did not say it.
Sorry, I didn't mean to laugh.
I mean it. Look, don't want to echo Andrew again. I roughly would have said the same thing, but I wanted to add on the matter of multilateralism. Another vice of the President's speech the other night, I thought, was his failure to remind his viewers that America had not done all this by itself. He was very ungenerous, I thought, in acknowledging the help of other nations and other cultures. One of the roles of Colin Powell in this process has been to remind the President and also the American public that the United States is a signatory to a number of international treaties and agreements, including, say, the Third Geneva Convention, and cannot just make up the rules as it goes along about prisoners it takes in war and so forth. I think it's very good there's someone doing that. So, of all the times I would have chosen not to say, which I've often said before, that Colin Powell is one of the most overrated people in the United States, a man who pretended to flirt with the idea of running for president just so he could sell a book, for example. I thought that was pretty low as well. Of all the times one might want to remind people of this, now would probably be the least propitious time.
A couple of quick, I need to do this very quickly because we've got people waiting. This is an email. I have read that the National Review will list to the right because of the new ownership. Is this true?
You mean the New Republic?
Exactly, the New Republic. For Hitchens, it says, you and Noam getting along okay? Noam Chomsky?